All right, Coach. I think we are now live on the Northview Cougars football group, football Facebook group. And how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, doing good. Nice Thursday night, a little bit wet, but doing well. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you having some time for another episode, if you will, of Conversations with Cougars. And we've had Coach Harry Wayne Parrish, we've had Coach Josh Parrish, we had Shane Cobb, a player from the first few teams, and now we've got Coach Chip Harris. And Coach, you came along in the early part of the 2000s and coached the Cougars for a 5-year run, and we're going to get into all of that time period and your players and your memories. But let's back up a step before we get to that. I know you started your coaching career, at least a head coaching career at Houston County. But tell us, where did you grow up? Where did you play ball? And give us a little bit of your background.
Well, I grew up in Chipley, Florida. My dad was an old high school coach and coached for 12 or 13 years, and then actually got out of coaching when I was younger. And so he settled in Chipley. My family settled in Chipley, and I played there for Skibo Wickham, who also coached at Northview, and went on to college and played football at UAB, and graduated from UAB, and then kind of started the coaching circuit. Started off at Luverne as an assistant, and then Charles Henderson, and at age 25, I became the head coach at Houston County, and did that for 19 years, or at various places.
Right, right. Coach, who was your coach at UAB? Your head coach?
Jim Hillier. It was when I graduated is when or after my senior year was when they hired Watson Brown, which I believe you played for at Vanderbilt.
I was just getting ready to tell you, or I think you knew that. Coach Brown was my coach at Vanderbilt a few years prior to that. And I spoke with Watson a couple of weeks ago, and I'm trying to get him on a different football group interview show, and that ought to be a lot of fun, at least for me. He's a hoot. But Coach, what was it like as a 25-year-old taking over and being the head coach on the high school level? You're only a few years older than several of your older players. What was that like?
Well, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. It was kind of I think insanity, but it was fun. We like any young coach, I probably did a terrible job, of trying to get things right those first few years, and luckily ran into some really good athletes, and we wound up having some really, really good records. But it was a lot more athletes than it was coaching, and but it was young and trying to do that kind of stuff, and also the athletic director. I think you need a few more years before you start diving into stuff like that, and I probably jumped in a little too early.
Well, it certainly, looking at your record, first 2 years were building years, it looks like. By year 3, you're 8-4 and making the playoffs. Year 5, you're 11-1, and but year 4, and then by 2001, you had the 2A back of the year and go 12-1 and score an amazing 458 points that season. So talk to us a little bit about that season and how magical it was for you.
Well, when I got to Columbia, I took over in July. I literally got hired about 2 days before school started. Houston County back then was on that year-round school where they started in July. In fact, a funny story, I walked into the office and asked the secretary, could I speak to Miss Deacle, who was the principal? And the secretary looked at me and said, young man, we're not handing out senior schedules till tomorrow. And so I was baby-faced, but we got through those bumps in the road those first couple of years and ran into just a really good group. We had 3 good running backs that were all in the same grade. And then we had another kid that was just a phenomenal athlete that played tight end that could have been as good a running back as any of the other three. But and then the 2A back of the year was Norris Drinkard. He wound up playing at UAB for Coach Brown, and was just we kind of settled in on a little double wing offense that I ran for years, and ran it everywhere in my coaching career except Northview. Northview's the only place I didn't run the double wing. I was more of a spread guy there, a Tony Franklin guy, but just having three good running backs and then having a quarterback who eventually went on to be the baseball coach at Northview named Jonathan Raspberry. Jonathan was 23-2 as a starter in high school. He was a phenomenal quarterback, but everybody equates him to baseball. And we just had good players, but we kind of had a magical chemistry that was really what that kind of made those teams go undefeated instead of going 8-2. They figured out ways to win ball games. They just refused to lose.
Well, by that fifth season, you had kids in your system since eighth grade, so they must have really known what was going on. Shirley C. says to tell you hello, Coach, and Josh Cobb just joined us. So thank you guys for tuning in for a minute or two. Coach, you go on from Houston County to Marbury for a couple of years before taking the Northview job. Talk to us about that time period leading up to your leaving Marbury. You've decided or you've accepted the job at Northview. You're going from a 2A for 7 years of your coaching when you're starting, and now you're jumping all the way up to 6A. What was that experience like?
Well, that was something that I'd always dreamed about doing, and I thought, that at that age, sometimes you think the bigger the better, and so it was. But it was at Northview the tradition. It just if you grew up in Chipley, which wasn't very far, and my dad was an old coach, and I can remember back in the mid '80s, Bernard, I think it was probably when you were playing. He was riding up to Dothan to watch playoff games, and I remember him talking about this running back from Phoenix City, and I think he rode up and watched Dothan play Phoenix City, and then the next week I think y'all played them, and looking back through those years, I think he must have been talking about James Joseph, and I think Dothan got beat by them one week, and then y'all turned around and beat Phoenix City, I think. But anyway, growing up, around Dothan and just, hearing those stories and then also as a young coach, listening to, to the Northview stories and whatnot, it just was, it was an appealing place. It had a lot of glamour to it. At that time, there wasn't a whole lot of winning going on, but the Northview Cougar name was kind of synonymous with tradition, and that was a big deal. That was something I wanted to see if I couldn't be a part of.
In fact, you were about age 33 or so when you took that job?
I think I was 32. I think
even younger. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Dothan Eagle thought I was the youngest coach, but they found out Coach Parrish was 31. So I think he was 31 and I was 32, but we both were, pretty young in our career.
Well, you're walking into a program that had lost about 30 games in a row at the end of the 2003 season. And how many kids, or let me back up, when did you start that fall, or did you have a spring camp you were able to in the spring of 04, or did you start fresh that summer?
I got hired somewhere in the 20s of June 23rd or something. And my contract started July 1st, so there wasn't a spring training.
No.
Coach Boutwell had done a spring training and it had a successful one. When I got there, they were in pretty good shape as far as, kids were working out and all those type things. But no, we didn't get a spring. We had to change offenses. We had to change defenses because Coach Boutwell had left and then some of the other coaches, Donnie Smith, I think had gone to Headland maybe. And so there was a lot of turnover. That was one of the beautiful things about there that people don't realize is when I walked in, there was like 4 PE openings, And so we got to hire some guys. Jeff Torrance and Jason Abercrombie took the baseball, and Jessica Noble took the softball. All of them weren't used for football, but we just basically brought a whole new regime in, and it wasn't anything I did. It just was the luck of the draw, but it was a good luck of the draw.
And at that time, you had about 7 weeks to get ready for Bainbridge. How many kids did you have when you broke camp in August to start practicing for that first game?
Our numbers weren't bad. I would say somewhere around the 70 mark. A lot of times when a new guy comes in, you pick up some new kids that want to try it. And that first team, which all of them did, but in particular, the first team had so much character. I mean, and I could tell stories on that bunch for days, but they didn't quit. That year, and I know we got a lot of talking to do, but one of the main things that I'll never forget about that bunch was we were 0-8, and we had to play a makeup game against Opelika that was supposed to be played week 3 or 4, but the hurricane had messed it up, and so they put that game after the Dothan High game, and one of the things that kind of heard was, hey man, after the Dothan High game, some of you guys are probably not going to come back for that last game or so. In this case, we had 2 games because we had to make up a game with Opelika, and then we had to play Stanhope Fillmore. And we got to Dothan, and we had got beat 28-7. It seems like about 6 times that year. We'd be 7-7 at halftime, and we'd kind of run out of gas. And I said, I'm so sick of getting beat 4-1. I don't know what to do, but it seemed like 28-7 or 27-6 or something, But we played Dothan High, and I think they beat us 28-7. It was close at half, and we got ready for Monday's practice to get ready for Opelika, and I go to call roll, and there's not a single kid absent, not one. And I remember thinking, we're going to be okay. That was the first sign that I remember thinking, okay, we're all right. When you're 0-8, Dothan High, your city rivalry beats you, and they recognize all the seniors. That's over with. So there's not really, in a lot of kids' life, not a whole lot to look forward to these last couple of weeks. And we didn't have one single kid absent from practice that day. I remember looking around and thinking, we're okay. We're going to be able to get this done. Lo and behold, that 5 days later, it was a really big surprise,
Well, you got close twice. 4th game of the year, Selma, you go down 22-20 at Selma. 2 weeks later, you go down 21-14 at Smith Station. You roll into the Opelika game on a 39-game losing streak, most of which you weren't there for. But it's a Thursday night. You're at home. And take us to that night, because that really was a pretty magical night for the Cougars and for yourself, I imagine.
It was. We just went to work that week, and I remember calling in the quarterback. We kind of had to play a little bit of quarterback by committee that year. We got banged up, and we had a kid named A.J. Batts that wound up being a really good quarterback the next year in the Tony Franklin system. He's the best pocket passer I've ever had. That was literally about 5'7". He could, you think, you got to be taller, but he had the best feet and could sit in the pocket. But I remember calling him in. I actually called him in on Sunday that week, and I said, AJ, we got to do something to get some points. We just couldn't score. We'd be close and just, and we started putting in some sprint out action. He was a lefty. And I remember we worked that week on rolling out to the left and running a lot of curl flat and just basic, route combinations that kind of worked that alley player, put him in a bind, and sure enough, that particular week my insulin pump's beeping at me. That particular week. we worked on that, and even though we didn't actually score an offensive touchdown the night we beat Opelika, we were able to pick up enough first downs and keep control of the ball to where we weren't just 3-and-out and punting and 3-and-out punting and 3-and-out and punting, which really turned out to be a big deal for us. It really helped us, tremendously in the game. But it was it was just one of those nights where kind of things fell right and fell our way, and it ended up being a big night for Northview.
Well, I can tell. I'm sure you know this, but Spence McCracken was still coaching then, and he was the Opelika coach that night. Well, let me take you back 9 years before that. He was the Robert E. Lee coach when they had Larry Ware in 1985 and were so very good. And we had a magical evening that knocked them out of the third round of the playoffs. Now, there were other years that Spence took it out on Northview, and I really think it goes back to that 85 game. But on behalf of all the rest of us, we want to thank you for, again, beating Spence McCracken on a great night for Northview. Do you remember what it was like on campus the next day at school, on Monday or that weekend? Because truly there'd been 3 solid seasons, almost 4 seasons, since the Cougars had been victorious in a game.
Oh yeah, that's a story. While we talk, I'm gonna ease over here and get me a little something to drink. But
Sure.
That game was a Thursday night game,
Mm-hmm.
and if you hadn't ever heard the tales of the way all that went down, it was a Thursday night game. And hold up a second, I'm gonna have to drink.
Go ahead, Coach. Take your time.
It was a Thursday game, and the first thing is after the game, nobody wanted to leave. It just, people just hung around, and it was just. I remember Matt Henderson coached with us, and had a big part of the defense that night. And Matt Henderson had always drove his truck over because he took a lot of coolers over, and he was parked in that little area over there in the corner of the end zone where you kind of went at halftime, and he just hopped up on the top of his tailgate and toolbox and just sat up there and just admired it. Of course, he had been there the year before with Levy, and so I remember him talking about just getting up there and just smiling, just sitting up there and watching. And then we got back to campus, and when we got back to campus, it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. There was people everywhere. I mean, they were everywhere. And when we got into the gym, Janaski Fleming and Mike Ferris were ahead of me, and they knew where the lights were in the lobby, but the gym lobby was completely full of people. I don't know how they got in there. I don't know to this day. I don't know how they got in there, but there must have been 2,000 or 3,000 people in there. And we were trying to get, how you go in the lobby and go around to the right to get to the locker room, where the lights were off. And we had formed a train, and I was holding on to the back of Mike Ferris's shirt, and we were going through single file through a wad of people. And Janaski got in there, and if I remember correctly, I think he just went and flipped the lights on in the gym and turned some music on and let them party a little while. And when we got to school, of course, like I said, it was a Thursday game. So when we got to school the next morning, we had a big pep rally, and there was all kind of signs and around, and I had gotten really sick of hearing the Dothan Eagle and those guys talk about the streak, and it just kind of always just it kind of festered inside of me. When you did your interview in July, they talked about the streak, and then every week they want to talk about the streak. So after the game, I had gotten a little bit kind of animated with the news reporters about I didn't want to hear anything else about the streak, and I didn't think the kids wanted to hear anything else. It was more for them to just, quit worrying about that streak. Let's just play ball. And so I guess a bunch of people had made up a bunch of signs, that the streak's over. Well, when we showed up to school the next morning, there was probably 50 signs around the campus, and every one of them had the word streak in it. They had taken a marker and marked it out. And that was I can remember looking at those signs, and that was a pretty neat thing, the way. But it was nice. Ron Snell was the principal, and he's now my boss again. He's the superintendent at Geneva, so we're back working together. But he got everybody together and let everybody out of class there about 9 o'clock, and we had a big, huge, pep rally and kind of celebrated and
those
finishing.
those are the best kind of memories, aren't they? They
Oh,
really
they are.
it really was, and frankly, from an outsider's perspective, I always kept up with what was going on with Northview, and it seemed like going into the '06 season, or the '05 season, it really just kind of propelled you guys, because you ended up opening with a win. I don't know, I think it was home against Bainbridge, and then you ended up always. One of the great things is, and we're going to get to this, is during your last 4 seasons, you beat Dothan High each year, and that's the longest continual win streak in the history of the rivalry, was beating them for those 4 years. And I don't want to rush through any of this stuff, but I want you to, if you would, talk about any of these other seasons, talk about any of these other players. You had quite a number of outstanding players that came through the program. As the team, your record progressively got better each year. There's just so many good things here to talk about. I don't know where to go next, Coach. So I want to leave it to you to kind of guide us a little bit.
Well, we could talk for days on it, but the '05 season was magical in that when we finished up the '04 season, and we played Stanhope Elmore that last ball game. We all kind of got all the equipment put up and got everybody kind of, went home and saw their wives and for a week or so we kind of chilled out, and then I can remember walking into a coaches meeting in November, and I said, okay, guys, I said, we got two options. I said, we can go to Air Force and go to running the triple option. I said, we'll see if we can round up enough money. We'll maybe go there in spring break and spend 3 or 4 days out there and watch them in spring ball. I said, we can go to Nashville to the Tony Franklin Clinic and learn more of a spread attack. And I was going to kind of leave it up to open discussion. And I even said, before I did that, I said, me personally, I'm an old veer guy. I said, I'm kind of leaning more toward the triple option attack. And the discussion ended when Jeff Torrance said, Coach, he'd worked with Jamie Riggs at T.R. Miller, and he loved the veer. He'd tell you right off the bat he loved the veer. He said, but we're not going to get any kids out of the hallway if we go to veer. He said, I think we got to look at the big picture. He said, if we go to a spread and throw in the screens and throw in the jailbreaks and get the ball to 4 or 5 guys on offense and spread it around a little bit and get some fun, he said, I think we'll serve better doing that than we will running the veer, which is a great offense. And I just closed the old book up and said, end of discussion right there, and that was kind of what we did. And we started right then and went in January and learned that offense and brought it back. And that was kind of the forte of that '05 season, was we could score. We got some kids out, Justin Johnson and was a basketball kid that we got to come out and play receiver. And then we had a good, Brooks was a good running back, and we had AJ Batts back, and we got to throwing a lot of screens and just spreading the ball around. We could that particular year scoring wasn't the issue. Defensively, we had lost some good players and some good defensive linemen, and in that year we were giving up more points than we. That was what wound up costing us then, But we wound up going 4-6, and we wound up going 4-5 at home, which I thought was a big deal. We kind of established a little bit of a grit at Rip Hughes Stadium, and I felt like we crossed one hurdle in that respect, was winning at home, winning some close ball games at home. And of course, we beat Dothan High. And that was a big deal. That was always, yeah.
That's always a big deal. Coach, I want to welcome Philip Braswell, and Janaski Fleming has joined us. So thank you guys for tuning in. And we're talking with Coach Chip Harris, the Cougars coach from '04 to '08. And Coach, each year, whether it showed on the scoreboard or not, it seems your teams were progressively getting better, more of a team unit. How are your numbers looking into your second, going into your third, and into your fourth years? Because I know that it's too easy for the kids to get pulled in all different directions. They want to play the sports that are a little more, appealing at times, just from an optics standpoint. And football may or may not still have been at that time as much of a priority as it was back when we were playing. So what was going on from a coaching standpoint, trying to get your numbers and keep them up and keeping the athletes on the field?
Well, we always had, decent numbers. We'd hang in there around somewhere between probably 60 and 75 kids. I remember Coach Parrish telling me one time, he said, right in that range, somewhere in that 65 to 70 range, always seemed to be about the best. If you got, a lot more than that, then you got a lot of people standing around, but you needed enough to have depth. And we were usually, I don't know the numbers exactly, but we were usually somewhere in that 65 range. And that was 10 through 12. We'd play a Monday night schedule, and those kids, for those younger 10th graders and some juniors to get some game experience. But that was the big thing with me on the numbers was we wanted to set a standard, and we told kids, if you're gonna play, you got to be in the off-season weight program. And if you're not willing to do that, then we don't think you're gonna win the big ones for us. And so when you held them to that standard, and you were sometimes going to lose a few here or there, but that was okay. We wanted the guys that wanted to be there, the guys that wanted to work, and they did. That was we had some really good groups that worked real hard.
One of the things you didn't have control of was your region, and I want you to find me a tougher 6A region than Region 3 that had Opelika Enterprise, Auburn, Central Phoenix City, Northview, Smith Station, Dothan, and Russell County. My gosh, that's a murderer's row right there.
It was.
Your fourth year, you go 6-4. You score a lot of points, 247 points on the year. And talk to us a little bit about that season. I know you had a couple of outstanding players, Patrick Reynolds and Spencer Pybus. Got awarded after the season with different recognitions. What was that season like for you?
It was good. We had some really good players. I mean, yeah. Spencer was a great player. Pat Reynolds was as dynamic a kid as I've ever coached. I mean, he could play quarterback. He could play free safety. He was our H-back, which is what we call a hybrid back. We threw a lot of screens to him, ran a lot of jet sweeps, but we had that bunch had a defense. That's the best defensive line that we had coming through. That year we had gone. Coach Torrance was the defense coordinator, and let's see, Coach might actually ended up leaving right before that. Maybe it was the year before, but we had gone up to Hoover to study the 4-3. We were a 3-4 bunch, and we'd gone to Hoover to study the 4-3, and me and Coach spent a couple of days up there with a fella that was the defensive coordinator at Hoover, named Jeremy Pruitt. Y'all might know who he is now. and I can remember, a little bit. He's kind of popped on the scene, but we spent 2 days up there in a motel just watching film with Coach Pruitt, and those teams. They had good players, but we had good edge rushers. That was one of the times there that we were able to get after people on the edge defensively, and we had some good kids in the secondary that could and scoring points. We always had a few athletes that we could get it out there to. That could make some plays, And Coach, you mentioned Janaski Fleming coming on. He's best wide receiver coach I've ever been around, he could flat coach them, and that's what I played in college. So that was a real important part to me because I thought I knew a lot of wide receiver play until I met Coach Fleming, and heck, he was as good as there was, and at teaching the intricate things. I remember him teaching diamond moves and different moves coming off of man coverage and whatnot, and that helped a lot because it allowed us to score some points to keep us in ball games.
Well, Coach, you get into the middle of the season in '07, a big win at Satsuma. Then you followed up with a bigger win at Russell County, overtime win against Smith Station. You stumble against Central Phoenix City, and boy, you guys took care of business against Dothan, 31-0, and that might be the biggest spread of any game in the series. But what do you recall about that 5-game? Then you followed up with the win. You beat Carver of Montgomery to end the season. So take me back through that 6-game stretch right there where you guys go 5-1, but for a trip up against Central Phoenix City, y'all really took care of business the last half of the season.
We did. Well, if there was one thing I'd probably do different, and if you look back at the records during that 5, 6, and 7 seasons, we would struggle week 7 or 8 against somebody that we might have been just as good as or really close, and it would be playoff implications. One year it was Phoenix City, the one you're talking about. One year it was Smith Station. And I think if I had to do over again, and Coach Parrish told me this, Coach Parrish was so good to me. I mean, he was so good at coming around, and he was a generation ahead of me and would tell me stuff. But he told me one time, he said if I had to say a fault on you, he said, I think you overwork them. And I said, okay. And he said, and he didn't mean it ugly. He just was telling me, he said, sometimes I think you overwork them. And I started looking back at those years, and I started realizing that not only do I think I overworked the players, maybe some in June and July, because it was 4 days a week and about 4 hours a day. And I think we probably overworked as coaches. And when we would get into that back end of the season, we dropped one here or there that cost us a couple of times, and I think it was because of burnout. And that's something I've kind of regretted through the years that I maybe wish I'd have handled it a little differently, was try to figure out a way to make it fresh, But we did have a good run in that stretch. I reckon that was '07, that stretch there. And I got to tell this story. We're playing Carver, and I've got Mr. Snell to come in and talk to the team during the week about, we got to win this ball game. Northview deserves a winning season. We're out of the playoffs. We've come down to a tie, and we lost the tiebreaker, so we're out. And so we got to win this ball game. And so two things. One, that the kids kept wanting this stuff called crunk juice. And all it was a big carbonated drink, that was about a 20-ounce carbonated drink. I can't think of a worse thing to drink before a ball game. But Susan Henderson was the lady that worked with us in the office. And I told Miss Henderson, I said, I'm going to buy them crunk juice. And I went around town and found somebody that had about 70 crunk juices. We iced them down, and we put them in the locker room. And when we come in after after warm-ups, back then kickoff was, I think it was 7:30. We come in about 15 minutes before kickoff, and we threw them all a crunk juice, and they went out and played like madmen. And I remember Josh Parrish just laughed, and he said, can you believe this? The worst thing you could ever imagine, and they're going out and, like gangbusters. I learned one lesson there. Sometimes it's just about keeping kids happy. And then the other one was we had a little lead in the game. It was late in the game, and maybe we were up 3 or 4 points. I don't remember exactly, but whatever it was, Carver throws a ball out in the flats, and Spencer Piba steps in front of it and picks it off. And it's a pick six, and it ices the game. I don't remember, it was a couple of minutes to go in the game, but it put us up 2 scores, and kind of took a little pressure off. And so I wheeled around and started hollering for the offense to get ready. We had to go out and kick the extra point, so I'm hollering for the extra point team, which is most of your offensive linemen.
Yeah.
And all, and I turned back around and there's a yellow flag on the field. And so I asked the referee, I said, what's the deal? And the guy's marking off 15 yards. The ball's going back to the 18-yard line. I said, man, alive, you got somebody acting crazy or something, you know? The referee comes over and he says, Coach, you guy kicked the ball out the back of the end zone. And I said, he did what? And he said, Spencer Pybus had caught the interception and run it back. And when he crossed the goal line, he knew the game was over with, and he was a senior, and he just punted that ball back to the tennis courts back there. And so the referee tells me this, and I'm just looking at him like, oh, my word, you know. And so the referee starts out on the field, and he gets about 10 steps out there, and he turns back around, and he looks at me, and he says, by the way, Coach, you've had the wrong punter all year. I don't know how far he kicked that ball, but it was far enough that that referee informed me I had the wrong kid kicking the whole year.
Coach, that's so funny. Did you ever go back and look on film to see the actual kick?
I don't think they called it. I think when he crossed it, the camera just cut off or whatever. But anyway, I just that's a story I'll never forget right there.
Oh, that's great. You know, looking back at the game scores during your tenure at Northview, that's the second most points you guys scored in a game. The year before, you beat Russell County and scored 51 in that game. So whatever y'all were serving those two nights, that seemed like a good combination. But,
yeah, I guess so. Maybe we need more crunk juice.
That's very funny. Well, Coach, 2008 was your final season at Northview. You guys go 4-6, and then you make a move to Ashford. Smaller program. When I say that, 4A as opposed to 6A. And you stay there for 3 years. And that was, at least as far as what I can see, 2011 was your last head coaching, but I know you're still coaching, so kind of catch us up what you've been doing from a coaching standpoint in the last several years.
Well, in 11, I left Ashford and went home to Chipley, and was the head coach there from 2012 to 2016. And my oldest son graduated in 12, 13, fall of 15. But left in the spring of 16. So I was there 4 years, and Tanner graduated. And when he graduated, I had 17 or 18 years in retirement in Alabama, and so I just had to get back into Alabama to probably I enjoyed going home, but retirement wise, it probably wasn't the smartest move. I lost them 4 years basically. But a friend of mine, Les Sanders, was the coach at Geneva. And he called me up, and we'd worked some Auburn camps together and different things. You know how just a coaching camaraderie is, and he knew I was looking to get back in, and I really wanted to stay in Dothan. My wife loves teaching at Ashford, and my youngest Sawyer goes to Ashford, so I really needed to stay within driving distance. And so the last 4 years, I've just been at Geneva helping out with Coach Sanders and doing whatever they need me to do. I've coached a little offense, coached a little defensive ends, coached a little linebackers, and just teach health. And this is the 25th year, but forum's in Florida, so I got to make those up. Otherwise, I would actually be able to retire this year if I hadn't gone to Florida.
Sure.
So
sure. I don't mean to jump around on you, but during your time you were at Northview, was Tanner on the sidelines as a ball boy or helping out with the team at any point?
Oh yeah, we've got a picture of him running off the field, and he's got on a jersey. We found a jersey that wasn't being worn anymore, and he always wore 17 because that was what I wore at UAB, and
sure. So
we've got some pictures of him, running around and coming off. And I tell you, the people there were so good. LeBron Stewart and Roy Dawkins were two guys that coached with me. Obviously, LeBron went on to be the head coach a few years later, and then Roy Dawkins is actually an administrator at Northview now. But they have toted my youngest one, Sawyer, who's a 10th grader now. But when he was 3 and 4 years old, we'd come in after ball games, and those guys would be toting Sawyer through the locker room. On Friday nights, stinking old locker rooms, and Sawyer would be right up there with them in the middle of it, And so I was always appreciative to those the coaches in the Northview community for, there's not a better place that'll take a group of coaches, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, whatever, and just wrap them in their arms and make them feel like home. They did that very well, very well.
Let's coach during my time, several years obviously prior to that, when Coach Harry Wayne Parrish was my coach. Josh Parrish and his brother Hunter were always on the sidelines. They were some of the ball boys, and if you didn't see them, you were wondering where are they, because they were always there, always at practice, always on the sidelines. And I'm sure you've heard Josh talk about the story about standing under the goalpost at Murphy, and he knows that field goal was good. I think in 90 or 91, but you're not going to get that call in Mobile when you're the visiting team. But always some great stories, and I know you've worked with and know Josh very well.
Oh yeah, well. Josh. Talked to him, pretty regular. Josh was. One story about Josh that I love telling. He talks about it from time to time. But Josh started off coaching running backs with me, and we had I can't remember. I think maybe Coach Torrance left and went to Hoover, and we had a little staff shuffling and. And I needed Josh to go to defensive backs, and defensive backs and offensive line are about the two hardest things to coach. I mean, you got to have some guys that they're all tough spots to coach, but those are so intricate. I mean, if a defensive back gets burnt, he's the last line of defense. Everybody knows it,
That's right.
And I called Josh in, and Josh had always been kind of an offensive guy. And I sat down with him and told him what I needed, and Josh just kind of looked at me, and I said, Josh, I know you want to be a head coach. I said, I think it'd be a good move for you to go to defense also to learn that side, so that when you do call plays, you know what hurts cover 2 and hurts cover 3 and hurts quarters and all that kind of stuff. And he's told that story 1,000 times. How he just was scared to death. But I tell you what, he wound up being as good a defensive back coaches I've ever been around, and Josh was just a great coach. Period. He's. In fact, I wish there was some way he'd get back in it. I hate to see the good guys get out. But I know he's having a lot of fun doing what he's doing and working with his dad and whatnot. But I hate to see them good guys get out.
Well, Josh and I had a real good conversation a couple of weeks ago, and Coach, we're getting toward the end of our conversation, and I sure appreciate you taking a trip down memory lane with us and sharing all these great stories. I'm sure there are dozens and dozens of more stories, but we just don't have that kind of time for this evening. But I want to leave you with the last word. I want you to share with us maybe something that another thought, another memory that kind of puts a smile on your face or puts you back in that gym or with the guys on the field or somewhere. Something that just kind of reminds you of some of those good times while you were coaching at Northview.
Oh gosh, there was so many. I think just the fact that Northview was so down when we come in, and the way that place responded, and just the pride came back, and they just wanted so bad to have a good program. And the way that it was almost like that they were ready to do anything. They just wanted to work and get better. And I can remember going into some of the prep rallies and somewhere along the line, it might have been after the night we beat Opelika, but we had this chant we did, and we'd say, what time is it game time? What time is it game time? Whose house is this? Our house. Whose house is this? Our house. And I can remember they just loved that. I mean, the whole student body would say it, and it kind of became a battle cry there for a couple of years. And just thinking back on those days, that was, gosh, I reckon 15 years ago or so, but it doesn't seem that long ago. It doesn't seem that long ago. Time
sure flies, Coach. And on behalf of the Northview Nation, thank you for for all those awesome 5 years and sharing your stories with us this evening.
Well, hey, I appreciate you thinking enough of me to talk about it.
Absolutely, and I hope to cross paths with you again sometime soon. And guys, Josh says, Josh Parrish just dropped in, and he said he wanted to know if you needed some crackers. He wanted to know if you.
I've eaten a lot of cheese crackers and drank a lot of Diet Mountain Dews in between running around getting stuff done. There's no doubt.
I'm sure you're always on the run. But guys, that'll do it for tonight's conversation with Cougars. Coach Chip Harris, 04 to 08, part of the Cougar Nation. And thank you, Coach. And we'll talk to you again another time.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.